This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors, Mossy Oak, Dakota Lithium, and RTIC Coolers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined today by one of the most exciting, I would say, and consistent anglers on the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour today, your reigning Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour Angler of the Year, Matt Becker. Matt, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. You know, I've always, this is my first time on this podcast. You know, I've seen you around, so it's cool to finally be on here and talk some fishing with you.
Well, we're excited too. Obviously, you've had a heck of a year and a half here. We'll obviously talk about here in a minute. But first, I have a very, very hard-hitting question for you. So we're going to start right off the bat with probably the toughest one I'm going to ask you. So I read a quote from you that says, and I quote, "If I wasn't a fisherman, I'd be a chef. I like it all. I do a good steak, ribs, and pulled pork. I like to cook meat." So if I were to drop you on like Top Chef or Hell's Kitchen or one of those Gordon Ramsay shows or whatever right now, and you have to break out your best dish, what are you breaking out to hopefully impress the judges there? What's like the Matt Becker signature dish?
Oh, I don't know if I have a signature dish. I mean, I really like making a good steak. So like I'll smoke it for a little bit on the trigger and get some smoke flavor in there, kind of tenderize it a little bit, and then kind of sear it to finish it off with a little garlic and herb butter with some rosemary on there. I mean, that's like my go-to flavor profile right there, like a good New York strip. That's probably like my go-to, but that's like personal favorite, like what I like to eat. As far as what I would serve somebody else, man, that's a tough one because I feel like everything I make is pretty good.
Are you the guy that has to cook on the road trips and stuff with the guys that you're rooming with?
Luckily Brittany travels with me. So tournament weeks, she's cooking for the whole crew. So she handles all that tournament weeks, but once we're home, and, I can spread out in our own kitchen. I'm doing all the cooking at home because I just enjoy it. It's just it's fun to me to try different seasonings and spices on different things and see how they react and create different flavors. Like I did a bone-in ribeye yesterday for dinner. We did that, and I messed around and actually put some cinnamon on it as a rub. And it was like phenomenal. It was like the best thing we ever had as far as prime rib. So I was like, see, this is the stuff, I like, because I was just in the kitchen looking for grabbing anything. I was like, I bet some cinnamon will be good on here. So we tried that, and it was pretty good. So I'm going to try that again for sure.
I worked at a old like Texas style barbecue for like 2 or 3 years in high school, and some of the things that go into like butt rubs and that kind of stuff that you put on meat would kind of blow your mind. Like some of the ingredients that they work in there. Steve and Vicky, who own the barbecue, would kill me if I said, but some of the things that go in there, you'd be like, I probably wouldn't predict that would be in the 17 things we make this rub with, but it makes sense. Yeah, cinnamon.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of where it stems from. Is like I've always just bought the rubs, and then I start looking at the ingredients, and I'm like, this is pretty simple. Like I can kind of come up with this on my own with. So that's kind of where it all stemmed from. But yeah, you were right. There's some crazy stuff that goes into some of those rubs.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we'll move to fishing here. So first off, obviously you're a relatively new face to people that, may just be following the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. I think last year was your full first year on the BPT, but anybody who's followed you before that, obviously you've been a force to be reckoned with on the Toyotas, BFLs, the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit, probably for, 8 or 9 years at this point, probably 2015, 2016, probably the first time that you were kind of making your way into there.
So this is my 7th year fishing full time, is what I would consider like the FLW tour up. So 2017 is the first year I jumped into the Toyota series.
So then since then, obviously you've had, obviously the BFLs, which is tough competition. You hear people talk about it all the time. Like a lot of these lower circuits are just, when you're cutting your teeth, they are tough competition for all of these people. And, you have all these regional hammers in them and things like that. But what's the biggest difference for you, obviously coming from the, Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit side and all of that to the BPT in terms of like strategy and the competitive side of fishing? What's been the biggest change to adapt to on the BPT?
I would say the format, the zeroing of the weights and the different days. I mean, that took me a little bit of adjusting last year. I mean, if you look at the results, I kind of got stronger as the year went on, as I kind of figured out the strategy involved with the format, with the, like I said, with the zeroing of the weights. Like you go out and you fish your first 2 days of qualifying. And basically what I've learned is that's basically an extension of practice. Like you don't want to be fishing your best stuff until the knockout round or the championship round. So like you're still trying to figure it out through those qualifying rounds, but you still got to catch enough to move on. So like it's a tricky situation, and it's a lot of moving parts, but that's what I love about it. It's all about catching bass at the end of the day, but then there's that strategy behind the scenes where it's like, I'm trying to save this for later in the tournament or a different weather day. So, I really enjoyed trying to learn that part of it the last year and a half now.
Well, especially since I think, right, they changed so that if you finished first in your qualifying rounds, you don't automatically get a pass, to pass the knockout round or whatever. So there used to be an incentive to try and, maybe if you were on fish those first 2 days, well then, all right, maybe I just buy myself, a one-way ticket and bypass the knockout round. And now there's not that incentive anymore. So now I think you're right. You're just trying to make the cut. You're trying to save your fish. You're trying to play the long game where there isn't that incentive there used to be on the first 2 days.
Correct. And that was kind of an oversight in the rules. So with the changing of the format, so like last year it was a 5 fish limit, and the knockout round and championship round, the weights were combined. So it was a 2-day total.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to change that rule to get rid of, a guy automatically qualifying to the championship round because he would be a day behind worth of fish. So it didn't work with that format, and it kind of got lost in the mix this off season, and that rule didn't get changed before the season started. And we showed up at Toledo Bend and we're like, wait a minute, typically in Every Fish Counts, you're supposed to want to win the qualifying round and automatically qualify to the championship.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of realized it after the season started. And, the guys got together and kind of proposed that we change the rule, but, the majority of the guys didn't want to change it mid-season.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we should definitely change it, but let's wait till after the season. And we don't want to change anything mid-season. So that's kind of how that went down. But definitely that adds another element into the whole strategy as well, where it's like, you could really crack them the first 2 days and automatically move on to the championship round. So that'll probably be implemented again for next year, but just kind of got lost in the mix for this season.
So if you want to look at your last year, you had a dynamite first full year on the Bass Pro Tour. 7 main events, the 7 stages, obviously. Stage 1, 47th, and then this is where obviously it kicks up. Stage 2, 6th place. Stage 3, 23rd. Stage 4, 5th. Stage 5, 6th. Stage 6, you had 17th. And then Stage 8, obviously a big victory in Michigan, and that clinches the 2023 Angler of the Year title for you. So that is quite a first year, obviously, on the Bass Pro Tour. I do have an interesting question, though. Does it bug you a little bit that they don't have a Rookie of the Year? Because then you would have just had like all of the Infinity Stones, the trifecta on that last event where you'd be like, I have Rookie of the Year, I have Angler of the Year, and I won the last event.
I know. So I thought about just getting a trophy made for myself, just since I was the highest finishing rookie. But, that was like a personal goal of mine going into the season, was to be the highest finishing rookie on the Bass Pro Tour last year. But, I think as the Bass Pro Tour matures and moves on, we may see that recognized a little more. But again, there's only a handful of guys that are new each year. So it's, kind of recognize them just a small group of people. So I'm not sure if they'll ever have an award for that. But yeah, I mean, it would have been, I would have needed another arm. I already had a trophy in each arm that day. So I don't know where I would have put the third one, but that it would have been cool for sure. I would have loved to have it because we got the FLW Tour Rookie of the Year right here. Mm-hmm. So I would have loved to add one right next to it, but I'll trade it for the AOI. That's for sure.
Yeah. Good consolation prize for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
So I would ask you if the pressure of a year like that gets to you, because I would assume it would, but I think you've already answered that question with your performances in the first 2 events of this year, right? I think you had 2 straight top 10s going into event number 3 that we're about to start here. So, by the way, with, format changes and, it seems like changing the rules 50 times in 3 years, and you have to deal with like all of these moving pieces of these things. So, how is it that you think you're able to keep up this level of success over the past year and a half so far on the BPT when you've got 80-ish guys out there, a lot of which are some of the biggest names in bass fishing that struggle a little bit, and you're able to kind of almost be like a top 10 machine here?
Yeah, man, I really can't explain it. I mean, I look back at some of these tournaments and it's just like, I don't even know how I ended up in the top 10. Like Santee Cooper, for instance, like I literally had, I think, 3 bites in practice, 1 bite in the spot that I ended up basically making the top 10 out of, but I had 3 bites in this little area or little zone of the lake, and ended up turning all of that into a top 10 finish. I mean, it's just crazy how things play out. But, really, it's like you said, it's not letting the pressure get to you. It's being very mentally strong and confident in what you're doing and your abilities. I'm fishing really well right now. Like, I'm confident in everything I do. I know every day I go out there, I feel like I'm going to find some fish or I'm going to catch them. I just know or have that feeling that I'm going to put myself around them. And that just kind of, it's contagious. Like, once it starts rolling, it just keeps rolling. And I don't know how to keep it rolling forever. Obviously it's going to come to an end, but, for now I am pumped and going to keep doing everything I can to keep this momentum rolling.
So you hear a lot of times, like when people are having success, where they're just saying, he's fishing his way, he's fishing right, he's fishing the way he wants to, he looks so confident out there, where like the pressure is off. And I think you're right. As you have more success, that builds, and that's okay. Like if you can keep that ball rolling, it's great. But at any point in your career, have you ever had to like start that ball rolling again, where you've just had like a super rough patch and you're definitely not in your element, you're second guessing everything, nothing's really going the way you want it to? And how do you kind of right the ship? Because I think it's really easy if the ship's going in the right direction the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you look at my career, so I've really had one kind of off season, and it was when it was 2021 actually. So I won a tournament at Lake Murray that year, but the rest of the events that year, just like things just did not go my way. Like I can't explain them. I'd lose fish here, lose a key fish here. I got sick for one of the tournaments. Just crazy things happened that year, and I really can't explain. It's not like I felt like I was doing anything different, but as the year went on, I felt like I was trying harder and harder and putting more pressure on myself. And I think that was just making it worse and worse. And, and then you're just trying too hard to get out of that. What I learned most that year is a lot of times you just got to relax and just like let things come to you, take it one fish at a time, one bite at a time. Just kind of let things develop from there. And, I did a lot of fishing that off season and a lot of thinking, learning more about myself and learning more about fishing. And, I feel like that tougher season really helped shape me into the angler I am now. It made me better overall. And, that's all you can ask for is when you're not winning, you want to be learning and getting better. So that's what I always try to do, but definitely, it may look like on the outside there's no pressure or anything, but I mean, inside I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. I want to do well. I always, I really want to win every tournament that I fish. So all that pressure is inside, but I kind of feel like I do a good job of hiding it and not letting it get to me and still just fish naturally and freely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also want to kind of expand on that a little bit while we're on the topic of, not everything going the way that you would want it to. Obviously, you had, a great season last year competitively, personally, everything was well there, the AOI, the everything. But you also did have to deal with your share of negativity last year, and I'm by no means going to rehash that. It's been beat into oblivion. That dead horse is dead, and it's been kicked and kicked and kicked and buried and kicked again. But yeah. I did want to ask you, as far as attitude goes, how do you tune that stuff out? Because there was a lot of negativity that, came your way, and there's a billion people with a billion different opinions on that. But the keyboard warriors were out in full effect. They're still out in full effect. And it would be one thing if you could just say, you know what? Yep, I'm going to avoid the internet. I'm going to shut all this off. I'm just going to go out there and fish. But now fishing is on the internet. Like your tournament is broadcast on the internet. You have a YouTube channel. You have a great, Instagram page. So fishing more and more by the year seems like it is an internet-based thing. And so you can't just completely tune that out. So how did you personally deal with, if it's people that are uninformed, don't know the whole story, but they're the loudest people in the room and you have to find a way to either move past that or tune them out?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, a lot of it, you just kind of got to ignore a lot of those things. But honestly, I probably have a lot of those people to thank for winning Angler of the Year, because I'm a very motivated person. And all that did was put fuel on the fire and just make me want to win even more. So all it does is motivate me when I see people, saying that, they're doubting me or saying I did this or that, when I know that I didn't do anything wrong. All it does is motivate me and make me want to get out there and catch more fish. So really, I took the approach of that, use it as motivation to want to perform and, continue to, I don't want to say keep those people fired up, but it definitely adds fuel to the fire and keeps me motivated for sure. And then, the social media side of things, basically we took the approach of just kill it all with positivity, because I'm all about positivity. I just love going out and catching bass. So that's all I wanted to do, was just focus on catching bass. I don't care about any of the noise. I don't care about any of the drama, none of that stuff. Just focus on catching bass, and the rest of the pieces just kind of fall into place behind that. So that's kind of what I focused on really the last few years. And it just kind of fit in even more so last summer, that just focus on catching bass, and the rest kind of just falls into place behind that.
More power to you, because that seems really easy in theory to do. And you're just like, I'm going to kill them with kindness. I'm going to, smile through it, and I'm going to grit through it. But man, there would be so much of me that's just like, you're sitting in bed, you're scrolling through your phone, you're like, I just want to light this dude up. Like, this dude has no idea what he's talking about. They're trashing everything that I've worked for 10 years. This person has no idea what they're talking about, and I just want to write like a Harry Potter book manifesto on why everything that they're saying is wrong. So I don't know how you guys do it, because I mean, everybody that's on the internet sees it. We see stuff like that sometimes too, and it's like you type something out and then you backspace and you're like, you know what? That's not worth it. I shouldn't do that.
I can't deny that I've done that a couple times, where I start typing a response and I'm just like, you know what, like it's not even worth my time, just focus on catching bass, and the rest kind of falls into place. But, something that Matt Pangrak said on his show one day, it's probably, I don't know, a few months ago, and it really stuck with me, and it really kind of brought it full circle and kind of put some closure on it for me. He said, I forget what he was talking about, but he said, basically, you realize that you've made it or you've gone somewhere when people start talking about you like you're not a human being. Like you don't have feelings. You're not a human being. They're like, I can just say whatever and trash this guy, and he's not a human, doesn't have feelings. So like that kind of resonated with me. I was like, okay, well, that means we kind of made it a little bit if people are, hating on us. So kind of made me, kind of put some closure on that and just kind of move on into this season.
Well, the next thing here, obviously, we kind of talked about it for a second before we started recording here, but you are originally from Pennsylvania. So you're, I think, just outside of Pittsburgh, somewhere like south of Pittsburgh, I think. But you recently moved down to Tennessee, I believe, like 10 mile down there. So What did that move? I guess, first off, what triggered that move? Because you see a lot of people, right, that grow up, and I'm in Ohio too. We're not in a great bass fishing area. And a lot of people that say, you know what, I want to take this thing seriously, they don't stick around in Dayton, Ohio, right? They're going to move somewhere where there's more opportunities, better water, where they can kind of hone their skills a lot better than the crappy lakes and rivers that we have around here. So I'm assuming it was a little bit of that too. Like, you want to move for more opportunities, more chance to hone your craft. But what has that move from Pennsylvania to Tennessee, which I know is still relatively new, done for you as an angler?
Oh, I mean, it's been huge. So, I mean, it was, like you mentioned, there was multiple reasons behind the move. One, I wanted to get away from the colder weather and be able to fish all winter long. We have to be on the water all the time to continue and get better. And, being in Pennsylvania, didn't really allow me to do that. There's always some downtime where I couldn't get out on the water. So I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to get more central in the country for travel. This area around here is very central to all the tournaments. So, I got basically I can make it to all the tournaments in a 1 day drive now versus, having 2 day drives and adding hotel rooms. So it was, sort of a business decision on that end. And then, lastly, I really struggled on the Tennessee River. I mean, that was my weakness for years. And it still probably is, on the weaker side of my fishing, but I thought the only way to get better is to fish it all the time. So I kind of wanted to pick somewhere along the chain and just really start to dial things in. So, I wanted to be around the Chickamauga, Watts Bar area and just really start to figure out those lakes. So that was kind of the process and to go on that. But now that I've lived here, I've got to be here this is my second spring. So, I really haven't, spent a whole bunch of time, have years of experience, but, being able to have my own shop, that was one of the other biggest things that really probably factored in the Angler of the Year more than I realized, is just having all my fishing stuff, everything under one garage. I can just back in, work on tackle, have all my extra tackle, have everything right there in one place, because I didn't really have that set up in Pennsylvania. So having all that here, that allowed me to be much more prepared and organized, and, over a long season, that definitely helps. So as far as like being used to different areas, I mean, we traveled so much to begin with. I wasn't really home necessarily all the time. So like I was basically living in the south of the country fishing all the tournaments. So, it wasn't that much of a shell shock to just kind of, move down here.
Yeah, those are some good points too that I think a lot of times I don't really think about, but make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, yeah, you're traveling to every event. You do want to be kind of centrally located to make that easier on yourself. Storage, obviously another thing that, if anybody's looking at this, like I have a semi-professional look here, and then if you would look this way or this way in this room, it's just a tackle tornado. Like the entire floor is treble hooks and baits, and it's like a landmine area that you got to walk through. So
you fooled me. I thought you had a nice full studio there.
No, this is like a spare bedroom that I've just got like carpet nailed to the walls, and then literally I can't take a step one way or the other without stepping on some sort of bait. You can barely see the floor. So I guess awesome. Like your organization wise there too, where are you in like the scale of me tackle tornado to like Brian Thrift? Where do you land?
Brian Thrift.
You are?
Oh yeah. The exact opposite. Just hearing that gives me anxiety. I mean, I strive myself in being one of the most organized guys on tour, and I feel like I am right up there with anybody. I'd put my money up against anybody as far as being organized.
Are you one of those people that can stay organized on the water too, or do you trash it and then have to come back and reorganize like at night?
Yeah, stuff will get trashed throughout a tournament, because I'm just grabbing stuff and throwing it here and there. But after each tournament, as soon as I get home, I spend hours in the garage putting everything back where it goes before I can mentally like move on to the next tournament. So like it's really just a mental thing. Like I got to go through my process. So like after each tournament, I pull everything out of my boat, tackle wise, rods, everything. I pull them all out of the boat, reorganize everything, and then I kind of got to like see it all on my tackle shelf to like put it back in the boat for the next tournament that I'm going to. So like it's just my process, but like I feel like it keeps me extremely organized, and I know where everything is at all times.
You should see. I should take some pictures. You want to look at like the inside of the hull of my kayak, where Hobie should never give me like an area, a foot by foot area to put things in, because it's just going to get trashed. And you look in there and it looks like someone went through like the aisles of Bass Pro, opened up, 5 things from every aisle, threw them in there and shook it up. And that's just how it stays all the time. So I need a jerkbait out. You grab a jerkbait out and there's 3 other things hanging from it, and you're hooking yourself.
Baits hanging on.
Oh yeah.
Oh geez. Yeah.
Scars on the fingers from all the hooks that you've hooked yourself with. But yeah. So then as far as as far as being down there in Tennessee too, so 10 Mile, I think before we started recording, you said you're like, what, hour and a half from Dale Hollow, which is obviously the next, event that's coming up. How much time have you been able to put in at Dale Hollow since moving down there?
Yeah, so I honestly, I fished a Toyota series at Dale Hollow in 2021, and that's when we started looking for houses here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because maybe it was 2020. Yeah, 2021. Maybe it was 2022.
And you liked it that much, and you were like, you know what?
Yes.
I think this is the area.
But we were at Dale Hollow, and I was like, you know what? Like, this is a really cool lake. I could fish here all the time. And then it just kind of worked out. But, so I had such a good time at that tournament that once we moved down here, I started looking, what lakes were close by. And I was like, shoot, Dale Hollow is only an hour and a half. So like, I started going there and fun fishing, so I've probably been there, I don't know, 15 times just fun fishing since we moved down here, just because it's such a good fishery. And, I really enjoy that type of fishery. It's got alewives in it, and, the bass feed up. So it's a lot of fun.
So of the events that you still have coming up, you've got Dale Hollow, Eufaula, Chowan River, you've got James River, I think, and then St. Lawrence. So of those, which of those are you most confident in going into the rest of the year?
Most confident. I mean, I would have to say the next one at Dale Hollow. I feel comfortable on that fishery. But sometimes that can be the kiss of death, just when you feel comfortable on a fishery, you kind of have an idea of what or how you think it's going to play out. And sometimes you can totally miss the boat when that happens. So, I'm kind of going into that tournament with a different approach because one, the smallmouth are in play. So typically in a 5-fish tournament or a catch and weigh-in tournament, you can't bring in the smallmouth. You can only bring in one over 21 inches per day. So, all those slot limit smallmouth are going to play in our catch, weigh, release format. So that's going to definitely change things. And I'm really going to approach it like a new fishery that I've never been to and just try and figure it out for what it is, next week. But other than that, honestly, like I try not to look ahead too much. The way my process works, I pretty much focus on one at a time. So right now it's all about Dale Hollow. And then as soon as Dale Hollow's over, it'll be all about Eufaula.
So the second part of this conversation, obviously, I gave you a little heads up before we started recording, but, obviously on Tackle Talk, we always like to try and go the second half with a guest with some sort of, educational component, some sort of tactic or time of year or something that people can take away from this and they can say, you know what, next time I go out on the water, not only did I learn this, recently I learned this from Matt Becker. So I think this is the fun part is like, trying to help people sort of become better anglers. And I think the topic that makes the most sense right now is post spawn, because no matter where you're at in the country, that's still going to be somewhat relevant for you, where everybody's spawn schedules are obviously a little different depending on geographically where you are. But post spawn for a lot of the country is still coming up. Obviously, like we haven't even, really hit pre-spawn like super hardcore yet up here. So we've still got a long way to go. But if people are, gearing up and they're getting ready for, the spring and obviously looking forward to post spawn, I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit on patterns and tackle and kind of how you approach that sort of late spring time of year.
Yeah, so once the bass are done spawning, especially in the southern part of the country, the first thing that I think of once the bass are done spawning is a shad spawn. They get on that shad spawn. It's like it's crazy how nature works. The bass spawn, they're kind of depleted, they're exhausted, they need an easy meal, and then they're like, oh, here's the shad. They're coming in to spawn, and you got a nice easy meal. So it's like just crazy how nature works like that. But so once the bass are done spawning, I'm generally focusing on a shad spawn. That's going to be for that, pretty much end of April through May time zone, generally speaking. And, the shad spawn doesn't happen everywhere. So, it may be unique to certain fisheries, but as far as the shad spawn, generally it's a first thing in the morning deal. So, I want to get out there bright and early, maybe even, a half hour before sunrise and get out there and generally the shad are spawning on a hard bottom, whether it's, sort of a riprap or even, kind of offshore. You see on the Tennessee River, those shad will spawn on, 2, 3, 4 foot of water out on like the river ledges and stuff. So, it's a great time of year to catch a lot of fish. But, post spawn, I'm picking up a topwater first and foremost, whether it's a walking bait or a plopping style bait. I'm picking up a topwater just because it's a lot of fun. You can get the biggest fish in the lake are going to hit a topwater, and then you can cover a lot of water with it and fish really fast. So that's probably my number one choice for post spawn bass fishing would be a big topwater.
That's interesting. So like the shad spawn, for people that haven't had the chance to experience, a lake that has a shad spawn, can you kind of sort of explain what's going on under the water and what you're keying in on? Obviously, the depths can be different, what they're relating to can be different, but the relation to where the bass are, a lot of times, feeding up on, these shad spawn if they're up near the top of the water column, or, depending on, some lakes are weird. And I can't remember where it was, one of the tournaments from the past maybe month or two. It might have been a BASS tournament. They were feeding down, and it was really cool to watch them on forward facing, feeding down on these shad too. But can you explain to people that have never got to experience that, what's going on under the water?
Yeah, so basically, the shad will be piled up by the tens of thousands. There'll be shad everywhere. And basically, I don't know the whole process on how that they're actually spawning, but they're up there rubbing against something hard, whether it's, like I said, rocks or trees or, shell bars, something that's a hard bottom to, I guess they're laying their eggs or whatever they're doing. I don't know the scientific side of what they're actually doing to spawn up there, but, those shad are going to be up there flicking around. You'll see them jumping around, and, a lot of times you'll see bass blowing up on them. So you'll see the fish on the surface, but if you don't see the bass blowing up, I'm sure there's still bass around, because generally speaking, if there's that much food on a nice, easy meal up against the bank, there's going to be a bass close by. So if you don't really see them blowing up or schooling, generally they're going to be just off a little bit, just a little bit deeper water. So you can kind of parallel them, and the next choice would be, kind of a square bill crankbait. So basically you throw a spinner bait, square bill crankbait, something like that gets down in the middle of those shad, and those shad are going to start following your bait to the boat. So that's like the number one telltale sign of a shad spawn, is when those shad start following your bait to the boat. So once you see that, you're pretty much going to get a bite here pretty soon, or there's going to be a bass around. You can count on that.
So the transition between spawn and post spawn, do you consider post spawn like basically the second those fish are moving off the beds and they start to kind of mosey on out, or do you see this like transition period between spawn and post spawn when that bite really starts to heat up?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a transition, because you'll have some fish that are garden fry. So like I assume that's the males. I don't really know the whole process there, but I assume that's the males that stick around the bed and are guarding the fry once they hatch. So, you'll have, I guess, half of the population of fish that stay shallow, but, a lot of those big females, once they drop their eggs, they kind of mosey out, and they're post spawn at that point. So I feel like you got, different stages of fish that are spawning at different times. So, you may have a big wave of fish that spawns pretty early in the year. And by the time you get to that, what you would consider the post spawn, there's probably some still fish spawning, but you're looking at percentages. You want the biggest percentage of the population to be doing one thing or the other. So you may still have a few fish transitioning, garden fry or whatever on the bank still, but I would say the bulk of those fish are out there, and they're going to find that shad spawn for sure.
We see a lot of that around here too, where it's like some fish, and maybe it's the females that move out first and then the males are sticking around, but it's just every single year on these certain lakes, you'll have some fish that move into that area that I know I'm going to target post spawn, and they're going out to the main lake points or the ledges or whatever, where they're moving out of those spawning pockets, and they do it quick and they get right out there and it's fine. And then there's other ones that mosey around and they just kind of hang around for another couple weeks even, or whatever it is. And you're like, what makes, I'm not rhetorical question, but like what makes some of those just dart out once the deed is done and they're out and they're done. And then others are like, you know what, I'm going to chill here for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and just kind of bring up the rear here.
I know. I think the same way. I'd love to know what the bass are thinking and, what causes them to act that way. But I've done, just thinking about it. Like I think those females probably drop their eggs and they're immediately gone. They're heading out and they're going on with their life. And then, you probably got just different phases of fish that all operate the same way. And, it's probably conditional based a lot of times, weather wise or, conditions, wind, that kind of stuff may determine some of that. But still, I would love to just know what that bass is thinking or, what causes them to do that.
And then there's part of it where sometimes I think, and it's our nature, but sometimes we overanalyze a lot of this stuff too. So it's like, it could just be they're creatures with, brains the size of quarters, and there's no 3D chess happening here. It's just like some of them are stupider than others. Some of them don't care. They've all got their own little weird personalities where they just, not everything fits in this nice, neat box like we wish it did. But there are some times where I'm just like, I don't know. I wish I could understand more than probably is understandable when it comes to bass sometimes. And that's the part that's a little frustrating, but also fun to try and put together the puzzle. But
I know. I agree. Like they're probably down there like they don't even know what they're doing. They're just like, yeah, we're just going to go over here. And they're like, these guys up here fishing for us, they're trying to figure us out. And we don't even know what we're doing.
Yeah, they're like, we're floating blobs. We have no conscious thought. And these guys are over here thinking that we're just masterminds down here. There's so much to analyze.
Exactly. But that's just how we work. We just got to think about something,
Yep. So here comes the fun part then, baits. And specific baits and what you're going to use around this time of year. So obviously I know you just put out a YouTube video maybe a couple days ago about 3 baits for pre-spawn and spawn, which I think you ended up with the Senko, the D-Shad, and then a mag draft, I think were your 3 for that time of year. But obviously moving out of spawn and into post-spawn, I'm going to assume those picks are going to change a little bit. So instead of, I know you mentioned a couple of them already, topwaters, square bills, things like that. I'm going to mention a couple others that we haven't talked about yet. And I want you to kind of, I guess, sort of rank on where these end up in your arsenal. And you say, you know what? Yeah, that is something that's going to be, my second, third, fourth option after I'm through square bills, like that kind of stuff. So chatterbaits, big swim baits, and flipping or crawling a jig. Do any 3 of those play a part for you post spawn?
So for me personally, I don't fish a jig a whole lot, especially post spawn. When I fish a jig, it's generally flipping laydowns or docks or something, and typically that's going to be more pre-spawn or later in the summer. So that post spawn time frame, I'm not really throwing the jig a whole lot. A big swim bait, I will definitely toss that around. And what'd you say, a chatterbait?
Yeah.
Chatterbait is definitely that's probably the number 1 on that list out of the 3. It'd be chatterbait, swim bait, and then a jig for me. Just that chatterbait is an excellent tool around the shad spawn as well. It's a bait that you can skip well. So there's a lot of time those shad are spawning around boat docks and stuff like that, and they're feeding on shad that are right on the surface. So you can keep that chatterbait right under the surface and just kind of cover a lot of water with it. So chatterbait definitely catches a lot of fish for me in that immediate post spawn.
So speaking of a chatterbait in particular, but also there's other baits that fall in this category too. Do you downsize in post-spawn or do you size up in post-spawn? Because around here, we tend to downsize post-spawn. There's just something about it where we break out like the Minimax chatterbait. Like that's a time of year where I'll break out a Minimax versus a standard size jackhammer. I don't know if it has something to do with the size of the shad. I don't know if it's, what the forage is doing or whatever, but for some reason there seems like post-spawn around here, there is a trend, and it seems to work, where we're going a little bit smaller with our profiles.
For me, I don't really adjust that much. Basically, I throw a pretty small profile chatterbait all year long. I throw the jackhammer chatterbait, but I trim the skirt a lot, and then I like the 3-inch Zako on there. Pretty much that's my standard chatterbait setup right there. So it's already a pretty small profile, so I don't really adjust that much at all. Really the main thing that I adjust with that is just the color, as far as conditions, water color, that kind of stuff.
So are there any post-spawn lures or techniques that weren't on that list? that you really like, where you'll gravitate towards that say, you know what, for a certain time of year, like, yeah, this is the time of year I'll break this out. Weird ones like scrounger heads or something like that. Is there anything that you'll keep out there and post spawn versus other times of year?
Oh, let me think on that. I mean, on the Tennessee River, the ledge fishing stuff, like definitely it opens a wide array of baits, as far as all the deep crankbaits and spoons and hair jigs and all that kind of stuff. But that kind of is like an animal of its own. So I'm kind of to like generalize into, multiple fisheries here. But, really the only other thing that I can think of right now is, more of a slow moving style bait. If you're fishing like a brush pile or, something that's offshore, a little bit deeper piece of structure that, those post spawn fish are just kind of hanging out in and recovering. And that would be like a big shaky head or, a big straight tail worm. So like, I don't want a whole lot of action. I don't want like a big curly tail worm, like a big power worm or a Yamamoto Ichi worm or something like that. I'm wanting like a big magnum trick worm or a big, shaky head style worm that you can just kind of have a straight tail and just kind of work that bait through real slowly. I put it on, a big shaky head, a 3/8 half ounce, and just kind of drag that around real slowly. And, a lot of times that big profile straight tail worm will get some really big bites.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of that too. Like a lot of times, we want to, water's warming up, the year's warming up, we want to run and gun, we want to, reaction strike and all this kind of stuff. But at the same point, those fish just went through one of the most stressful things they're going to go through all year. So maybe if it is those big females that moved off first, right, they're tired. There's going to be days where they're probably not going to chase the burning square bill right past them or the burning jackhammer beside them. So you do need something to slow down. And, it's not always just power fishing around, late spring. It's like you are going to have to slow down at some point. So that's a good point. As far as your straight tail worm of choice goes, you said obviously like a magnum trick worm. Is there anything else specifically that you've got with you?
No, I mean, that's probably the go-to. Yamamoto makes a Slinko, and it's more of a ribbed style. It's kind of a wider profile, and it's made of floating plastic, but it's not quite as long as the Magnum trick worm. So that's really probably my go-to is the Magnum trick worm. But if I want a little different profile, I mix in the Slinko as well. But that there's something about that Magnum trick worm that just gets bites.
So as far as rod, reel, line setups go for some of these things, so let's start with like chatterbait. As you're out there and you're working a jackhammer, what's your go-to setup for that? We're gear nerds here. We love this kind of stuff. So what are you out there throwing?
So really, I got two rods that I throw a chatterbait on. I got one for like open water, more grass fishing, or just kind of, not making short, precise casts. I'm making extremely long cast, open water, and that's I like to throw a 7'5" medium heavy. So it's the favorite hex casting rod, and then I throw that on 15-pound Seagar and Vizex. And then, if I get around docks or real tight cover where I'm trying to make short, precise cast, I go to a 7-foot medium heavy. And that's the favorite Pro Series. Same line, 15-pound Seagar and Vizex on that.
Are both of those fast rods?
So they're both more. So the hex is the 7.5 is labeled as a fast, but it's more of like a moderate fast. And then the 7-foot medium heavy is more of a moderate fast as well. So it loads up fairly well, but it's still kind of that fairly fast tip.
Yeah, I think you're seeing, that was the trend, especially a year or two ago, right? People were slowing down their rods for chatterbaits. A lot of these people, I still use a glass rod for chatterbaits a lot of times too. So some of that stuff, and I didn't know where you landed on that spectrum of, it seems like people are one or the other. They're either like, nope, I want a fast stick, I want to be able to whoop these fish and I want it to load up really quickly. Or there's people like me that sometimes I need help slowing down on my hook sets on, a chatterbait fish, and I need help keeping it pinned, and I'm in a kayak and that kind of stuff. So that slower rod just, it handicaps me enough where I'm not ripping that chatterbait out of that fish's mouth, and I'm actually able to get them to the kayak. What about let's go topwater. So say you're fishing like, a Zara spook or something like that out there. What are you out there throwing like your walking baits with?
Yeah. So, I don't like to use a real expensive rod for throwing topwaters. You don't need a extremely sensitive rod or anything like that. So generally speaking, I'm going with like a $100 rod. It's the favorite Defender series, just a 7-foot medium heavy, or even a 6'10" medium, just depending on the size of the bait and how far I'm casting it or how much the bait weighs. If I'm throwing a big shower blow or something, I'm going to need a little bit beefier rod there to handle it. But so for topwater, I've been always going back and forth, but I think I've settled on braid to a mono leader. So I'll run like 30-pound Seaguar Tactics braid, and then put like a 12-inch mono leader, like 20-pound mono on there. Just mainly the mono is to help that bait from tangling on the front hook. So that braid is notorious for tangling on the front hook. So adding that little mono leader really helps avoid that front treble hook from tangling. So that's the main reason for that. But that's pretty much my setup, and just get out there and topwater is so much fun because you get to see them eat it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I live for topwater smallmouth blowups. Like that's why I wake up in the morning. That time of year where you're just like, you know what? I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna watch. It's gonna look like someone threw a cinder block in the water when this smallmouth comes up and hits this sexy dog or whatever I'm out there throwing right now. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. As far as reels go, I don't know if you mentioned that. What reel are you using for topwaters?
So I just pretty much use whatever reels that I feel like I want to use, and I've settled on Shimano's lately. So I'm for the chatterbaits, I really like throwing the Bantam, just 7.1 to 1 gear ratio. Hard to beat the Shimano Bantams, and then for my top waters and my jerk baits and lighter style baits, I go with the Corrado. I think it's the 71, the 70 series. It's a little bit smaller reel, and top water, I generally go with a faster gear ratio, so I'll go up to an 8.
What about your square bill rod?
Square bill rod, I don't really have a perfect square bill rod right now. There's a couple that I throw. One of them's a 7-foot medium heavy moderate glass cranking rod. That's for more of like, I'd say your 1.5s to 2.5s, that little bit bigger bait. But if you want that real small crankbait, I kind of like a 6'10" medium, and it's a straight graphite rod. It's not a glass rod, but I kind of go back and forth and just kind of play with them, and kind of really depends on the bait. I kind of pick the bait first and then kind of match the rod to whatever bait I'm throwing. What
is the square bill of choice currently?
Square bill of choice right now, lately, I've been throwing the Bill Lewis SB57. So it's kind of like a 1.5 size, I would say. It's not labeled that. I mean, there's only one size of the SB57, but it comes with a circuit board lip, so it has a very tight action and deflects off cover well. But that's the one I'm picking up first right now for sure, is the SB57.
Are you using a slower reel for a square bill, or are you still just using a 7 to 1 or something like that?
Yeah, I go with the 7 to 1. So really the only time I use a lower gear ratio than that would be if I'm deep cranking, and that's mainly just for fatigue issue. I like to be able to control the bait with myself and have that ability to pick up more line if I need it there. I would rather wind really slow with a fast gear ratio reel than wind a normal speed with a slow gear ratio reel, and then when you need that speed, you don't have it. So that's kind of where I let stand on the gear ratio stuff. But yeah, square bill is more that 7-1 medium.
Yeah, I've kind of gravitated toward that too. I used to be a 6 to 1, 7 to 1 tops kind of guy, just sort of old school. I love the older reels and things like that. And then I have slowly gone to the same thing you said, where it's like I can control how fast I'm reeling this thing, except if I'm out there with like a DT16 or something, then yeah, I don't want a 7, 8 to 1. But other than that, most situations at this point, a fast reel is going to do you fine.
Exactly. No doubt. I mean, you just have to be aware and know that you can't just aimlessly wind as fast as you can all the time. When you're working a crankbait or spinnerbait or something, like, you got to pay attention to your retrieve. But I want to be able to control that,
Do you have any sort of bait modifications that you're doing to anything we've talked about? Like, I know everybody has their own sort of little spin on a lot of things. So whether it is, if it's chatterbaits or whatever it is, right, that you like, that's kind of like the Matt Becker flair on certain tactics or certain lures that you're using that are kind of unique to you?
I mean, so a chatterbait, I mean, I do a lot of things to a chatterbait right out of the package. I actually, we made a YouTube video about this and gave up all the juice. So if anyone wants to see what we're talking about, you can head over to the YouTube channel and check it out. But basically, right out of the package, like, first thing I'm doing is like fluffing up the skirts, and sometimes it gets stuck together, and then I'm trimming the skirt right at the hook. So I want that little bit smaller profile, and then it allows that trailer to still have some action back there. And then, like I said, that my signature thing is that 3-inch Zaco. So I like that real small trailer on there. It allows that bait to dance and hunt a lot more than a bigger, bulkier trailer. So that's really, the gist of my chatterbait setup. There's a few other little things that I think we could dive into, but that's really that's about it.
So it's funny you mentioned the skirt touching that's probably like my OCD. You said yours is like your tackle stuff. Mine is, if my skirt is covering what should have action on my trailer, I want to like gouge my hair out. There's just something about the very first thing I do, like you said, take out a chatterbait, you hold it up, and you just do a straight cut at the end of the hook. And it's like, at least now I know if I've got a Kitech on the back, if I've got anything on the back that should have any sort of movement, I've got a crawl or anything, you don't just have a skirt draped over it and it just completely hides the whole thing. People that do that blow my mind. I don't know how they do it. It makes me it's like nails on a chalkboard watching someone with their skirt covering up their trailer.
Yep, you're telling me. I'm the same way. It's just like, it just has to make sense to you, and like that longer skirt is just impeding the action of whatever trailer you put on there. So like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So like, I want to trim that down and make sure that the trailer you're putting on there to add a new action, that it actually works the way you want it to.
So you said you gravitate toward the Zaco, but that's like I would call a Zaco not a ton of aggressive action on the back of that chatterbait, obviously. Are there any situations where you'll go to more of like a crazy flapping action, whether it's a big wide crawl or whether it's more of a traditional like paddle tail, boot tail swim bait there?
Not really. So there's really only one situation that I'll go with more of a crawl type trailer, and that's when I want the bait to stay very high in the water column. So like, typically that's fishing around like lily pads or, visible clumps of grass or like visible vegetation in the water. I want a more flatter bait or a wider bait that keeps that chatterbait higher in the water column. It wants to pull it up. And, that's really the only situation that I switch up trailers, and, I'll put on like a Yamamoto Yama crawl or something like that. That's kind of a bigger crawl type trailer that, kind of brings it up closer to the surface.
Well, I have one final question for you here. This is the Dakota Lithium mailbag question here. You can use code TackleTalk10 for 10% off over at dakotalithium.com. This question is from Matt. His name's Matt also, so there we go. We have a Matt here. He asks, can you ask Matt if he has any tips for fishing post-spawn, specifically from the bank?
Post-spawn from the bank? I mean, it kind of just goes back to what we talked about with the shad spawn. I mean, those shad are going to be spawning close to the bank. So, you're not at a disadvantage fishing off the bank. They're in the shad spawn or post spawn for sure. So, the number one key would be getting there very early in the day. Like I said, getting there before the sun pokes up, because those shad like to spawn basically the first hour before daylight into maybe an hour into daylight. So, that first light is going to be most important for your bank fishing, but definitely post spawn, there will be fish pushed to the shore on a shad spawn. So you're not at a disadvantage fishing off the bank on a shad spawn at all.
Do you see the shad spawn gravitating toward one side of a lake versus the other, whether it be, the way the sun obviously rises and sets for the east or the west side of the lake, or is wind more important? When you're seeing those shad grouped up, is there anything that you can kind of help pattern and say, this is at least where I'd start?
I've never really paid attention to it that much. I've never really noticed, one way or the other. It's generally it's more of a habitat thing. You're looking for the rock or the marina or the boat docks or whatever the shad are spawning on, more so than, this side of the lake or that side of the lake. So, they obviously spawn everywhere. So, I don't know how they choose one area or the other, but I've never really paid much attention to that at all.
The good news is most of the things that they're going to relate to, even if you're, a bank guy with no electronics, like they're pretty easily seen, right? You're talking about the rock wall that leads into the marina, any sort of riprap wall, the dam, like all of these big, easy landmarks or whatever that you're going to be able to see out on the lake are going to be hotspots usually, especially, big hard surface stuff for shad spawn. So at least you don't need to be out there with your, side scan out there doing crazy stuff. It's like most of what you at least want to start to gravitate toward, you can see just like pulling up Google Maps, where you can walk out on the lake and be like, you know what, that obviously makes sense to start with.
Yeah, it's going to be visual stuff. And like I said, it's going to be visual as far as seeing the shad. So, if you're not seeing the shad, then, there's obviously not a shad spawn there. So you're going to have to move on. But yeah, it's definitely very visual.
Well, hey, obviously, we appreciate you stopping by today. Thank you so much. Before we let you go, obviously, I know the past probably year or two, you've really kicked up the YouTube channel. You have great Instagram. You have great social media pages there. If people want to keep up with you and this year and kind of soak in, because you do a lot of this too. You do a lot of, top baits for X month or that kind of stuff. So if people really want to go dive in and learn a little bit more about what you're throwing, what you'd recommend, where would you send folks?
Yeah, I appreciate the shout out. So definitely check us out on all social medias. Matt Becker Fishing is the YouTube channel, and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We got all of it. Where you can find us on there. And like you said, we're always posting little tips, little tricks, that kind of stuff. The goal of my channel. So we really put a re-emphasis into the channel. Over really to start this year, we kind of. Brittany and I talked about it, and we're like, let's really try and grow our YouTube channel this year. And, the goal of my channel is I want to help the viewers or the subscribers catch more bass. Like, that's what it's all about. I want to help you guys catch more bass. So that's what the channel is all about. And it's always, we'll mix in a little tournament footage here and there and, tournament recaps and that kind of stuff. But the bulk of the content is all about tips and tricks and how to help you catch more bass. So appreciate you giving me the shout out, and hopefully we can help a few more people catch some fish.
Well, go find him on YouTube. Obviously, we'll be watching you here as you guys take on Dale Hollow here in about a week and a half when you guys start to head that way. So we appreciate it so much. Good luck to the rest of the season, and we appreciate you stopping by today. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. For more, please subscribe to the Tackle Talk podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts.